So we're going to start. If you could introduce yourself to us and tell us about who you are, where you come from, just anything you can tell us.
Okay. Hello, I'm Caroline Bordignon, and I come from Ontario, Canada, and now I'm based here in Manchester, UK. Came here in 2016 to begin my Masters at the Royal Northern College of Music, and now I've stayed.
So Canada to the UK, came to study. When did you meet the Lord? Were you always Christian? Were you as a little girl?
I've been a Christian since I was 5, and I have a Christian family, so my family always told me about Jesus. So by the time I was able to understand who he was, then I started asking about him for myself, and then my grandma led me in a prayer when I was 5.
Fantastic. Now, obviously, we know each other, and I know that you do music and you're a composer, and you also paint, and you also see music in color. So tell us a little bit, because obviously people are hearing this for the first time. If you could explain what that is and sort of how you see that.
Yeah, so seeing music in color is called synaesthesia. And there's different kinds of synaesthesia, and it just means the crossing of senses. And in my case, it's, I think, the most common form of synaesthesia, which is called chromesthesia, and it sounds to color crossing of senses. So when I hear music, I also see color, but it's more in my mind's eye, in my imagination. So I don't see it physically, but it is always there, and it's something that I can focus on if I want to, or it's just in the peripheral. And for me, it's related quite a lot to the intervals of notes. But when I think about specific notes, I also see specific colors, although I don't actually have perfect pitch. So I think that if I just hear a note out of nowhere, my perception of the note might be different than what the note actually is. But it all depends on many factors of the music, how fast it is, what instrument is playing, and it's more like one big texture, or like a painting, and then the individual notes are more like the brushstrokes, like just one piece of the overall picture.
Wow. So obviously, God blesses us with different talents, different gifts. I know one of the gifts that you have is composition, creating music, creating sound, painting. I've seen some of your art pieces. And for anybody listening, we will link your website down there so that they can see your work and your Instagram page and all of that. But with the different gifts that God has given us, obviously there's things that have to be done for it. So for example, you could be blessed with a certain talent. I want to ask you, my question to you is, how do you use these gifts? So seeing in color, I know you're a great artist, and I say artist because you do music and you do art as well. What has your journey been in this field of creativity, but also living your life for God through this, in this creative field?
It's very different and it's very unique. And yeah, it's interesting because this kind of art is quite abstract. So it's not really traditional, really like religious art or traditional Christian art. But the way that I think of it is that I'm just expressing something that God has created. And I actually believe that music is visual, and it also in its original design, the way that God created it. And that's because I've just heard so many testimonies of people that have seen heaven, and when they see music, they do see it like floating through the air. And I've heard people say as well, again, I've never actually seen this myself, but I believe that it's true that when we praise and worship, that we actually do create an artwork, like a visual art, like and God sees it in our singing and also in our dancing, because everything on earth is not just physical, but it's also spiritual. So God is seeing the full picture, So just hearing those testimonies throughout my life really just confirmed to me that that this is actually the full experience of music. We just don't see it with our physical eyes. So that's one important aspect. And I also just think that when we're expressing our gifts and we're doing it with a heart of worship, that we are pleasing God, and also that it's also a form of spiritual warfare, even if many people might not know that initially. That it's definitely, I think that music is a form of prayer, especially if you are actually created music with a heart of worship, no matter what genre it is, because music really is a kind of language, just not with words. And I think that that's really powerful. And same with visual art, even if it's abstract, it still speaks and it still says something. I think it's like the rest of God's creation. It just it reveals something about God in a more abstract way. And God understands what it means, but it's also a very spiritual thing. Other aspects as well are, I think that color really ministers to people as well, and sound, again, in ways that we don't understand with words. It's spiritual, but it definitely is so important for mental health, for example. I think that's the way that God designed music and art. But there's just something about seeing color that I think really touches people. It's just like when the sun is out, you just feel so good. And when you see beautiful flowers and colors, it's just, it just feels so good because God created all of these things. And also music is so important as well for mental health. And of course, there are so many studies showing how healthy like listening to Mozart is in classical music. And I should also mention that predominantly the music that I'm composing is what you would call contemporary classical. So it's not so much like pop or jazz or anything like that. And also often I paint live to music, and I don't just create still paintings, but a significant part of my painting practice is painting live to music. So I'm creating live visual representations of synaesthesia in music, and just creating that experience for people to understand.
Wow. So my husband is absolutely a big fan of classical music, contemporary classical. I mean, he drives and there's classical music playing in our car. Recently, he had these ballads playing of psalms that people had composed around the different psalms. And when I think of music, I always think of David, and I think of the psalms, and I think of the sound, because every time I read psalms, I can almost picture the sound and the orchestras and the this sort of vision of music that David had and his worship unto God. There is one of the scriptures where it says, he enters into this holy place and he lies down on the floor while there's this sound going. And obviously we know that in our spiritual lives, sound, there is a sound of heaven, and we can distinguish between that. If you're very connected and you know Jesus and you're connected with the spiritual side, spiritual things, I want to say there is a sound of heaven. And that sound, when you meet people that are in alignment with God, you can feel that sound. You can feel not only sound, but even the things that they do. It almost carries a part of heaven there. I want to ask whether you've ever experienced something supernatural, or even in your personal life where, while composing or while painting, or even when you were, let's say, planning these compositions, you had a dream or anything like that was just ministered to you.
Yes, I have. And sometimes, I mean, in my own creating, but I can also think of times where I've experienced it when other people have played. And I just remember, for example, I just remember this one experience in my childhood when I was in a piano competition, and one girl who played, and she was a Christian, and there was just something about her playing that was just so, it was definitely so anointed, because I just remember it was just, you just felt definitely, you felt like you had like a transformative experience by her playing, because there was just something so, it's so hard to describe with words. There's just something transformative about it when you experience it, and you remember it, and it changes you, and yeah, I've experienced that, and also in my own work as well. When I listen to it, it's certain pieces, I think really they speak of breakthrough, for example. I'm just thinking of a certain piece where I think that you can really hear that in the music. I think the experience of listening to it is, I think that it does cause breakthrough in your life, because that's what it's saying. But every piece has its own effect, and I think it's its own prayer. So every piece will something different will come from it. And in my own composing, something really interesting happens. I've noticed that, and this has been actually a consistent pattern, that the pieces that I really pray about, which have usually been pieces that I've been under a lot of pressure to complete by a certain deadline. So I prayed so much into the pieces, just asking God to help me finish the pieces, and then just asking him to really touch them, because I'm less confident that the performance will go well. Those are always the pieces that end up being the most successful in terms of just being received so well, and also just having so many re-performances. There's a piece called Intertwined for singing solo viola, and that piece was a work that I did really pray into, because I was actually so afraid that was going to be my worst piece when I first gave it to the performer, because it's a piece where the violist is singing while she's playing, and there aren't really a lot of works like that. And when I first showed it to my tutor, he said, this might be impossible. And I didn't really have a lot of other things to go by as reference, but I prayed into it so much. And even I remember when the performance happened, I was just so afraid that it just wouldn't be good. But then that piece, it ended up going viral. Two Set Violin found it, and then they did a show on it, and then it got 100,000 views on Classic FM, and then now people are still purchasing the score for me and playing it around the world. And that was one piece where I really, really, really did pray into it so much, because I did actually think it was going to be really bad. And even when I first heard it, I was kind of afraid maybe it wasn't successful. And then it went viral. And so that's definitely God's hand on something, where it's less to do with me and even exactly what I compose, but it's just that God's presence is on it, and he anoints it for something. And that's the part that obviously I can't do that or replicate it myself. That's only something that God can do. And that's also happened with a few other pieces too, and they were also works that I was afraid would be my worst, and they ended up being my best.
It's so important, and I want to break that up. Obviously, you mentioned about your pieces that you've done, and one of it, is it called Intertwined, went viral, which is amazing. And you touched on two things. You said you were afraid of failing, of that piece not being your best work, but then you said you prayed. And that's such an important image. Like, even while you were speaking, that image of, when God says that he's not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and sound mind. And you take that and you say, no, I'm not going to let this dictate it. I know something that can actually overpower this. And that's the power of prayer. And you mentioned it's not about you, or it's not about what you've written, or it's not about your composition, but it's the fact that in prayer, God used it for what he wanted to do through it. I think as an artist, I think one of my questions to you will be, we live in a secular world. I mean, we have these 5-minute videos going viral on TikTok, Instagram. We have this whole social media frenzy right now where everyone is an influencer, but obviously there's intentions, right, behind everything. Some people are there to get famous. People that don't know God probably are pushing for monetary gains, whatever. As an artist, how do you feel when you're in a secular world and everyone is pushing for that 5 minutes of, popularity, trying to get something viral? And we know that as believers, the scripture says, when you do any work as you're working unto the Lord. And I've always taken that as being holy and pure and honest, and just dedicating everything you're doing. So the works of your hands and everything that you're doing, you're basically remembering that you're not doing it for yourself, you're not doing it for anything else, but you're doing it for the honor of your Father. How do you work when, obviously, because when you're doing compositions, I'm guessing you're working with different people. Some of them might not be people that believe in Christ. They might have secular viewpoints. How do you work in this new age that we live in of social media, and also make sure that, the pieces that you've created, which have God's will in it, that has, you mentioned the hand of God being in it. How do you get people of, let's say, of secular views to come together and sort of make this sound that carries almost heaven in it? How do you work with people like that?
Really, I just pray over it. I just pray over the performers and over the music. I think that's it, really, because I can't control necessarily, well, most of the time, who's actually playing it. Because up until now, for most of the time that I've been composing, I've always been in college. So many of my performances have come from students in college, and and just being asked by performers to compose a work, people from all different backgrounds. So I don't really usually have a lot of control over who's playing it, but I think that God can still use it, even no matter who it is. And I just always pray that whoever is playing it, that they will be changed, and that they'll experience something different in the music that I'm composing.
Yeah, wonderful. Caroline, talk me through your creative process. Everyone has a creative process. What's your creative process as a believer, as someone that loves Jesus, who's in this creative industry? What is your creative process?
It changes, sometimes piece to piece, so it depends on the piece. But usually, and now I like to just sit and think about the music. I mean, if it's a big piece, now I like to just sit first and then just start to think about it. And if I'm not doing anything, if I just sit down like at any time and just go to compose, I'm just flooded with ideas. Really, like, I usually don't have any trouble with creative block or anything like that. I have so many ideas all the time. So I usually just begin to think about the piece, and then I just start hearing things. So it's actually quite simple, because really, I'm just composing what I'm hearing in my imagination. And I always pray that I do hear heavenly things. But obviously, there's also an element of I'm making choices as well. So yeah, it's a partnership with God, and I just ask that whatever I compose, that He touches it, because nothing that I do will ever be perfect, and some pieces are better than other pieces. But what's most important is the anointing. So when I just go to think about a piece, I usually just hear like an initial sound world and little, it's almost like a puzzle, just little glimpses or little like motives. And I also see it too because I'm synesthesic, so I sort of like see kind of like some colors and what it looks like. And then I like to draw more of a visual picture to start planning out the structure of the piece, and then sort of timings. Especially if it's a bigger piece, then it is a bit more important to know like how the structure should be and to see it. But then I just sit down and then I just start sketching the actual notes by hand. And more also, I mean, I usually sit at a keyboard because I don't have perfect pitch again, so I just need something to actually pitch the notes to match the notes that I'm hearing in my head. But more and more, I like to get away from the keyboard because you don't want to write every instrument like you're writing for piano. And I just like to sing and just sing what I'm hearing and then write that down. But yeah, and sometimes, again, it is a little bit like a puzzle because in different sections of the piece, I might not always know immediately what every single instrument should be doing. Obviously, it's different for a solo instrument and then an orchestral piece. So I try to just write down what I'm hearing, and then sometimes I'll go back to those parts and then think about, okay, what will the other instruments be? And then I compose that part. And then I'll create a draft, and then just continue then working on it more and more until it's done. But really, I'm just composing what I'm hearing in my imagination. So, yeah, I'm not really doing like extensive planning or using like certain musical rules or systems. But so many times, there's been so many like really interesting things that emerge in the music that I didn't necessarily plan, like people telling me like the counterpoint, like, wow, the counterpoint in this one particular piece is, I'm just thinking of a piece called Incandescence, which is for string quartet, and it's quite a modern sounding piece and it's very abstract, but to me, I see light, like it kind of looks like the Northern Lights synesthetically. So I think that piece is expressing light. And people tell me all the time about the counterpoint in the piece, that it's so interesting. But I didn't plan that. I was just writing what I was hearing. And I really believe that God gave me those things. And that's God's touch on the music. And just, he is obviously giving me ideas. And I'm not really thinking about like all the little structures or the counterpoints or things like that. I'm doing it on purpose. It just happens. And that happens to me quite a lot.
Okay. Wow. I think one of the things I also wanted to ask you, obviously you see in light, and you perfectly described how you were seeing your piece in color, and you saw it at these northern lights, and obviously we know the northern lights are beautiful. They're very colorful, very, very radiant. This gift that God has given you to see sound and color, has he also shown you other things, or are you able to see other things in different ways when you go out? How does he use this seeing, the gift of seeing things? How has he used it for you?
I'll have to think about that a little bit. How
or the other way of thinking about it is like, how does he speak to you? Because obviously you can hear sound, you see in color. How does he speak to you? Like, what is his way of speaking to you?
God's way of speaking to me, I feel like it's still actually quite normal. Yeah, when he speaks to me, I don't know. I can't say that normally when I hear God's voice I wouldn't say that even it's really like I don't really see like colors synesthetically in the same way. I hear when God just speaks to me day to day, I still hear like words or thoughts in my mind. But I would also say that a lot of times it's more of an impression as well. Like he speaks to me in impressions, and also feelings where, yeah, it's not always words. Sometimes it's maybe more of a knowing, and also I do have also pictures a lot as well. So it's kind of all of those things, and also I also have dreams quite a lot. Really prophetic dreams, and not only just things that are for myself, but also I receive quite a lot of prophetic words for other people that way as well. But yeah, it is often very visual. But I wouldn't say I've actually ever experienced it as like seeing colors in the same way that I do music.
Okay.
But I do think that I do think that when I'm imagining and hearing music, that God is speaking to me. So he is speaking to me that way when I'm in that creative process.
Yeah, I think the reason I asked that question is because many people will always ask this question, does God speak to me? How does God speak to me? Because I think the way God speaks to people is different. I do believe that everyone doesn't hear the same way. God speaks to people in the way they would hear. Like for me, God uses, because I would love to be a farmer. I'm not a farmer, but I do love growing things, and I'm a very much a plant lady. And a lot of the times when I'm in the garden or I'm doing something with plants, a lot of the time some of my biggest lessons have come from just the simplest things that he's spoken to me. I also see, so I will see a lot of pictures. I see like almost like what you would call as a reel happening, dreams, of course. You mentioned earlier when we were talking about, God's collaboration in pieces with you, collaborating with God. Has there ever been an instance where you've you've drafted up this whole composition, it's looking great, and suddenly God gives you like sort of an impression of, no, I think we need to change this?
I definitely have had that happen. Where I've gone back and edited something, or it just something seems like it's not working and it needs to be changed, because I don't always get it right every time, and sometimes there are some pieces that I'm not praying as much as others, and so something needs to change.
Yeah. What sounds to me is, what I'm taking away from everything you've spoken is that prayer is a big part of your life. Praying about your pieces, praying about, God's hand being on the pieces that you're creating, whether that's music, whether that's art. And you mentioned something now, like sometimes it happens, it happens to all of us, we are not praying about certain things. For anybody that's listening or is going to be watching this podcast, what would you say is the importance of prayer in a believer's life, in someone that is not only in the creative field, but for anybody, what is the importance of prayer?
It's really giving God, it's allowing him to work in your life, I think, because we have free will. He doesn't actually force us to like invite his presence into his life. So I think that it's so important because you're opening the door for God to be present in your life more, and also to be working in your life more. And I think that if you don't invite God, then he won't necessarily be working in your life as much, because he actually wants us to invite him, because he doesn't usually force it, but he doesn't usually like always like force his way onto our lives. So by praying, we're just opening a door to God and allowing him to come in, and that's really important.
Yeah. Wow. How has prayer changed you? What has prayer done for you in your life? I mean, I know I've personally been privy to a lot of your testimonies, but how has prayer what can you share with people of how prayer has worked in your life, or how prayer has changed you?
Prayer is such an important part of my life, and it I mean, I've always prayed, but I didn't actually really understand the significance and the importance of prayer until probably my early 20s, and that was when I was first coming to England, and someone else actually in my church told me they just said that they felt that they should pray with me, and so I just said, oh, okay, and then we started praying together, and then they would say, I really feel like God is saying this, and I just believed it like, wow, God is saying this, and that's what I was thinking too, and I just believed it because I just always thought it was so amazing when people like heard God for you, and so I guess I'm trying to say somebody really taught me about the importance of prayer, and when I started to apply that to my life and started to really learn that actually prayer is so literal, and when you pray that things actually do happen, and it's so important it's so important in our lives to pray and also walk by faith, but that prayer actually changes things. When I really learned that experientially, it really began to give me so much more peace that I never had before. Because before, I really began to learn that through prayer we can really lean on God, as in that we are no longer relying on ourselves and our own efforts. But when we pray, it really opens the door for God to actually move and change situations and to do things, rather than us doing all of the things that need to be done in life. It really just gave me so much peace, and just more and more, gradually, I just began to have a lot of peace in my life, because I just began to realize experientially that I'm not actually the one that has to do everything perfectly. Like, just in like anything in life, I'm not the one that brings things together, and I'm not the one really that in the big picture that has to get every little step right. For anything to be successful, like any aspect of life, that it's God, and I mean, obviously we have to take responsibility and we still have to do things, but I would say that before I really began to learn the importance of prayer, there was more worry and also fear underneath of my actions, like driving my actions. Like, oh no, if I don't do this, then something bad will happen, and I've got to work so hard so that this will happen, and I've got to get all the steps right, and like, there was just so much more pressure on me, and it's so stifling when you live that way, and it's so stressful. But yeah, more and more, I just really began to be filled with so much more peace, because when I pray, God works it out. Even if I made a mistake, He just will correct it in some miraculous way. Like, even when I was in university and I felt like I wasn't ready for a deadline, I've had things like where I really prayed that a deadline would be moved, and then just miraculously it would be moved. just anything. That God really partners with us, and He helps us, and we can really lean on Him. And so now I'm in life. It's more like underneath of everything is just peace, even if something is going wrong. Because I wouldn't say necessarily that like circumstances in my life are more perfect, or it definitely doesn't mean that everything is always going well, but just instead of feeling worried or fearful, instead there's just a lot more peace, because I know that no matter what, that God can change any situation, and also anything that is bad, He does turn it around for good in the end. So peace is a big thing, and that does also really help creativity, because I know when I'm composing and also making art as well, that I'm not relying on myself to get everything perfect. It's more about God's hand on the music and on the art than it is actually what I'm doing.
I think when you don't have prayer, what I've noticed in my personal life, when I'm not praying, there's things in me, whether that's character, whether that's mindset, whether that's, the way I see things, the way I communicate or interpret things, it gets very twisted because somehow I'm not connected to the source, which is God.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like sometimes when there's pressure, so for example, the pressure of deadlines, the pressure of completing a piece because an artist wants it, or how do you sort of reset that? How do you practice saying no to the pressure and then just continue doing what you're supposed to be doing?
Again, it's still prayer, and then also just being in the Word and reading, like standing on certain verses and also declaring them into a situation. That's also really important, to be speaking that out loud. I would say those are the two most important things, and not just my own prayer, but also having other people pray with me and pray for those things. Especially because, it's not that every piece is not every piece is my best, and some pieces I feel like aren't my best or aren't that good. But I still pray that it will be successful because of God, because of His hand on it. So that's what's most important, and because ultimately I'm still not perfect, and I don't always 100% of the time get everything right in my own work as well. So everything is flawed to a certain extent, and I just pray most of all that something will be successful because God's hand is on it. So that helps a lot.
Okay. Obviously, in terms of music, and I'm mostly talking from a secular music perspective, we're very careful of what we take in as Christians in terms of, in this day and age. For anybody that's Christian out there that is, on their journey with Jesus, what would your recommendation be if they want to get into classical music, listen to sort of, ballets or, all that kind of music? What would your recommendation be? Where should they start?
I would say, it's there's so many things that I could say because I have all my favorite composers.
Maybe give them top 5. Let's say top 5.
Okay, Ravel. Ravel's piano works mirrors are beautiful. Chopin, of course, Beethoven. There's so many. It's so hard to choose. Debussy. Again, these are my favorites. And I also listen to a lot of contemporary orchestral composers like Ray Vaughan Williams. These are more like modern works. The Lark Ascending. I mean, that's an important one for England. And there's also a really fantastic composer called Pretorius, I might not be pronouncing it right, Vasques, Arval Pert, Kaya Sariaho. Yeah, it's hard to say because I don't know, because people have different musical tastes.
Yeah, of course.
There's just so many different types of classical music as well. So those are my favorites.
Okay. I know music is also visual, but let's talk a little bit about your painting. So obviously you said you do a lot of live paintings. I know you did a collaboration. Was that in Singapore a few years back? What can you tell us about that?
Yes, although that collaboration wasn't actually live painting. It was a collaboration with the Filipino artist Mark Henry Bongabong and his new works of abstract paintings called Mamlaka. And Mark commissioned me to compose short violin works for each of the paintings. And there was also, he painted a series of small paintings called fragments that come together to form one big painting. And I composed another work for that for a live performance in Singapore. And that was a really, it was a commission of my dreams because Mark's abstract paintings. You have to look them up because they're just so beautiful. But he just paints these big, just colorful abstract works that they kind of, from a distance, they look like jewels, like light shining through colored glass. But then when you get close, it's much more, you can really see the brushstrokes. But the works are inspired by the verse in Matthew that says, "Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you." And then other verses from that passage. And the theme of the series Mamlaka is kingdom, and Mamlaka is Hebrew for kingdom. And so each painting actually has letters. It's like letters and numbers of the verses hidden abstractly. So when you first look at it, you just kind of see colored glass, but then you'll see, like, as you look at it, you'll see the letter and numbers emerge, but it's kind of meant to be hidden in an abstract form. And so the music that I composed is inspired by that. And he didn't actually want to show me the paintings right away when I composed the works, so somewhat they're inspired by the theme of the verses, which I thought was more of the melodic part. But then eventually I did see the paintings, and that also came into the music, especially in more of the effects and the sort of sound world that I created. Yeah, and of course the color really influenced the way that I composed.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, hopefully we can get Mart on here or alongside you one day and share more about any collaborations happening. When you collaborate with people that are also, in love with Jesus, creating for the kingdom, I've always said that, it's almost like there's oil flowing through these pieces, because I know I saw snippets of it on Instagram, on stories of your time in Singapore, but it almost felt like God had ordained this. The response, I mean, I'll let you share. What was the response in Singapore?
The response was amazing. There were, it was a little bit, it was kind of tricky at first to organize everything, because we came from like different parts of the world, like UK and Philippines, and then we met for the first time in person and had to plan this event. And there were changes to the venue. But yeah, it definitely was like, it was amazing how God provided that venue for us, because it was supposed to be in one place, and then that didn't work. And then it just so happened that there was a lady, she was actually a Christian lady, and she just had blocked out, she had reserved this beautiful room in a hotel that just was overlooking the whole city. So the background of the event was just like this panoramic glass space overlooking the whole city. And she invited a lot of her contacts to come, and yeah, all of these things just came together, and lots of people attended the event. And it was also, they also featured some creative talks by, there was someone from America, I think a Christian teacher from America who spoke, and he spoke about arts, like arts and faith. And all of these different elements came together to form this event. And yeah, it was really well received. And it was just so beautiful. I think especially that we ended up in that particular venue. It was nicer than where it was supposed to be before. And just all these things just came together. Another interesting thing was that actually the violinist that we asked to be part of this project, she just contacted me out of nowhere on Instagram and just asked if she could just talk to me about my work. And then she said that she was interested in potentially collaborating in the future. So I actually never knew her before that. She literally just contacted me. And then after she contacted me, maybe a few weeks after, then Mark did the exact same thing. And then he just contacted me out of nowhere and just asked if he could just talk to me about my work. And I just thought it was going to be just a chat about my work. I never imagined that all of this would come from it. And then shortly after he spoke with me, then he commissioned me for this project. And then when he commissioned me, then I knew exactly who the performer would be, because the violinist had just contacted me, and she is also a Christian. So I thought that was really important, and that it was important to work with the right person. So yeah, it was interesting how that all worked out. And the way that Mark found me was that we've actually been Facebook friends since like 2009 because of mutual connections with a Canadian couple and people that were kind of friends of mine in Canada, like not even people that I know myself, but he sent me a friend request years and years ago, and I think I added him because I just saw his artwork. And I remember when I was in school, some of my classmates, they had siblings that had gone on trips to the Philippines, and they knew who Mark was. And we were looking at his artwork in my art class when I was in like grade 9. And someone was saying, wow, this guy in the Philippines makes this incredible realistic artwork. And he was actually the first photorealistic artist that I had ever seen. I had actually at that point never seen an artist even doing work that was that realistic, because traditionally he's a portrait artist. So anyways, we were Facebook friends for all this time, and then he just messaged me out of nowhere because he was deleting messages one day and he saw a message from 2009 when he added me, and he said, thanks for adding me. And then he just saw my name and then just said, oh, who is that? And then he saw on my profile things about music, and then he listened to my music in his home studio in the Philippines, in just this beautiful setting with like the ocean and just the jungle, and that's how he found my music. So deleting Facebook messages.
Wow. I want to ask you, because throughout this time we've heard about how God has really, really been there, through whether that's sending people like Mart and the violinist, or just opening doors for you. What has the favor of God done for you, Caroline?
It has opened up incredible doors for me, and often I just find that if I do my best with the small projects that I have, it usually does open up a further door that I never would have imagined. And I found that, that's definitely it's a step of faith when you don't necessarily, you might, like, I've worked on so many things that they don't seem like really they're big things, but if I just do my best, then it always seems to open up the door to something a lot greater.
Yeah, and I think the lesson to take away from that is, in the Bible it says if he can trust you with the little, then he can trust you with the big. And it's so important that even the little, we don't discount it. And that's what I'm hearing from what you have said. If people want to hear your work, where can they go?
They can go on my website, which I think that you have a link. There are a few things on Spotify as well, which I'm just slowly going to be posting more and more, and also SoundCloud.
Yeah, we'll put those links in the description.
Thank you. Maybe I'll give you a few links to a few specific pieces. And so far, most of the things that I posted online they're more live recordings, and a lot of things that have happened in college. And now I'm slowly beginning to do more studio recordings, and also I'm slowly beginning to get into film music as well. But most of the recordings are actually just live recordings that have happened in live performances and concerts. Because I'm primarily a composer for concert, so it's different than like a film composer that's making soundtracks.
What are you working on next? Anything you can share with us so that people who want to, follow you, want to sort of keep up with your work, can know what's coming up.
Next, I'm actually composing an orchestral work which is going to be performed in Vienna by the Vienna Chamber Orchestra next month. So I'm really busy with that now. And sometime in the summer, I will have that recording to share. So I'm really excited about that. Another thing is soon I'll be able to post excerpts of a 20-minute orchestral work that I've just composed. And it was for a prize. And unfortunately, it was commissioned as part of a prize. So unfortunately, I didn't have any live performances. But yeah, I've just composed this. It's the biggest piece that I've ever composed in my life. So I'm just learning how to use like sound libraries like that film composers use. So once I figure that out, then I'll start posting excerpts of that work because I spent a lot of time on that this year. And there's also a few smaller projects that smaller pieces and artworks that I'm working on myself. For example, there's a series called Desert Rose, which is a series of paintings of various roses, and I'm creating compositions with each painting, and I'm sort of slowly doing that around these other things. And eventually I'd like to maybe like travel to maybe a few exotic places and like study actual desert roses and maybe do a few pieces based off of like that. So I have a few of my own things as well that I'll be sharing soon. But for now, that orchestral piece coming up will be a big one.
If people want to purchase your art pieces, your paintings, where can they go for that?
They can also go on my website, and also I have an Instagram, which is also just for artwork, and it's linked on my just usual Instagram account. Also Facebook. I also now have I have like a main artist Facebook account, and I've started a new one that's just for paintings. And I don't usually list prices on my social media or website, but you can see the paintings which are already collected. It just says private collection, and then ones that don't have that, and also commissions as well.
Fantastic. What is one thing you want to share with our YouTube space, people probably around the world that possibly might see this video? What is one thing that you want to share with the world about their faith journey, their creative journey? Because I know there are so many people that are getting into the creative space and possibly feeling a bit burnt out and giving up. What would be something that you want to share?
I would just say just to really make time and space for God in your life, because He will always be the refreshing that you need. And if you just do that, if you put Him first, then you're less likely to get burnt out, and also it will give you so much more clarity and peace as well. And just invite Him into everything that you're doing, because what's most important is that God's hand is on something.
Exactly. And I second that. God's hand being on everything that we do is so much more important than what we think of that piece or whatever it is that you're working on. Caroline, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to just share your story, share what you do, share the power of prayer in your life. But also, we have a part 2 coming. It is still in the works. We definitely will get Matt on here and talk a little bit about the different things that you guys work on together. We definitely have a part 2 coming out. But for anybody that is listening that wants to purchase artwork or wants to keep up with Caroline's work, all of the links will be in our description box on our Instagram pages. Follow her. She is open to commission, as she said. She is open to whether you want art pieces painted. She is open to those things. Obviously, all of her contact details will be here. But Caroline, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. Thank you so much for taking the time out. I know you're super busy with your upcoming project, but thank you so much. We bless you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.